Hey y'all, it's Andrew with Free Tours by Foot. It is fall in New Orleans. We are experiencing some of our best weather of the year. And normally that makes this the time, one of our seasons when we have a lot of our big festivals. On top of that, in 2021 fall was gonna be the time that we moved a lot of our spring festivals back to. And y'all hear the way I'm phrasing this. Was gonna is a verb tense that we've all heard way too much of. And sure enough, a lot of these festivals that we had planned, most of them ended up being canceled in the wake of New Orleans' experience with the Delta surge, as well as Hurricane Ida right afterwards. So a lot of expectations for this time of the year ended up being disappointed. But at the same time, this actually is the moment when we have more live events happening than we've had in the last year and a half. That includes our typical traditional indoor live music scene, just with added precautions. It also includes a lot of outdoor music, the kind that we haven't actually had a whole lot of in the past, plus our traditional French Quarter street music scene. And it includes some festivals that are happening in creative new formats that accommodate the needs of the times. So today, in case any of you are considering coming to New Orleans now, or God knows a lot of these things are gonna stay around for quite a while, if you're considering coming here anytime in the near future, we're gonna share some ideas about how to find things going on. We're gonna be talking to a couple different people. One of them is gonna be a journalist, Alexandra Kennon, who's got her ear to the ground on this scene. She'll give us some suggestions. And stick around after that, because we're gonna talk to Doreen Ketchens. Y'all may know her as one of the most noted French Quarter street performers. She's one of the best musicians we get in any format in town, and she's gonna talk with us from the musician's point of view about what's going on in town right now, and we'll share a little bit of performance from her as well. Here we go. Y'all, it is my honor to introduce Alex Kennon, who is the arts and entertainment editor at Country Roads Magazine. Thanks for doing this with us, Alex.
Hey, Andrew, it's great to be here.
So just context first, y'all. We are in a very important place at a very important time. We are shooting from Le Petit Theater in the French Quarter, a just about century-old theater that has just ended its longest hiatus from live performance in its history. There is a live show happening here.
They've opened their first show of the season, Dear Mr. Williams, featuring local favorite actor Brian Batt.
Who y'all may know from Mad Men.
Absolutely, big favorite there. Also a former resident of the French Quarter himself. But Dear Mr. Williams is a one-man play that Batt wrote himself. And it's a heartwarming, funny coming-of-age story that incorporates a lot of Tennessee Williams into it. Not only do you have some references to Tennessee Williams plays, you've got some of his sort of less talked about material, his poetry, his fiction. Tennessee Williams has a special place in my heart. That was one of the last shows that I did before I made the shift to tour guide and then writer and editor, was some world premieres of Tennessee Williams one acts from the very beginning and very ends of his career. And of course, Tennessee Williams has a very special place in the heart of New Orleans as a whole. So
used to live just along the block, so walked by this theater, probably saw shows at this theater plenty of times. So.
Absolutely. So it couldn't be a more appropriate show for Le Petit to get started with for their first season back after a long hiatus. And it also makes sense logistically on the level of it being a one-man show. I think that was pretty smart on their part. You know, they're not trying to cram 20 actors backstage. They've just got the one, and they're able to kind of follow safety protocols, which is how we're able to keep live performance going, we've realized.
Yeah. After this show opening and bringing to close a year-and-a-half hiatus, like this feels like sort of an exclamation mark among ellipses, you know? There's been so many just kind of waiting periods, and every now and then you get one of these benchmarks that makes it feel like it's all happening again. Are there other of those that have stood out to you as kind of like, yeah, we're back kind of moments?
Absolutely, like little returns to normalcy that have been good feelings. Most definitely. I mean, Le Petit is not the only company that's finally returning to in-person performance. Baton Rouge Ballet Theater is going to be back in person for the first time this month in October with the production of Philadelphia. That ballet, they've actually got some members of the Philadelphia Ballet Theater coming in and helping with that, which is really exciting stuff. We also have other companies throughout the state that are able to kind of adhere to these safety protocols to get audiences back in person. Theater Baton Rouge is doing that, as well as the NOLA project here in New Orleans, and a lot of other companies in town are finally able to sort of return to in-person audiences, and that's because they're doing it safely. So it's been a really inspiring thing to see.
As y'all can hear, Alex knows the event scene in the city and in the state extremely well. And when we actually first got in touch was after you had written a piece back in August before Hurricane Ida that was about kind of the state of the performing arts then, called our Renaissance is pending. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you did, absolutely.
So one thing that I thought was fascinating about it is you kicked that piece off by saying the story that you wrote was not the story you set out to write. I imagine that happens to journalists all the time, but you don't say it very often. Can you tell us what made you feel like that was the right move to make?
Absolutely, that's a really good question. Frankly, I just felt like it was the most honest and the most genuine way to open the piece, because I think it's something we can all relate to, that sort of roller coaster of an experience that we had. When I first pitched the story to the rest of the editorial team at Country Roads, it was towards the end of June, beginning of July, and you probably remember that things felt very different at that point in the summer. I know after I got my second vaccine dose back at the beginning of April, I felt invincible, and I was so just excited and ecstatic to be returning to places like where we are right now, to audiences and to music venues, and able to see performers back on stage doing what they love again for the first time in entirely too long. And that was such a good feeling. So I was feeling very hopeful, as I think we all were. It's sort of the state of things and the fact that we had made it through this difficult collective experience, and we thought we were on the other side of that. So when I pitched this piece, I pitched it as a follow-up to another piece that we wrote in September of 2020 for that performing arts issue. And that was by another writer at Country Roads, Lauren Hefker, who did a beautiful job of kind of capturing how different performance venues and theaters across the state of Louisiana were handling the pandemic. And of course, at that point in September of 2020, things were really sort of at their worst, So she did a great job keeping it relatively upbeat, or as upbeat as you can, but it was a difficult piece to address, and she did a great job with that. But this summer, when I pitched a follow-up to that, I was excited to be pitching a much more hopeful piece, a much more happy piece. I was witnessing, a lot of my friends and a lot of other folks throughout the state who were able to return to their livelihoods or able to return to audiences, seeing theater again, seeing music again. And it was an exciting feeling, and I wanted to be able to document that. So I pitched the piece, and then time came around to write the piece. And by the time I was sitting down to write the piece, I was actually quarantined myself because my partner, who is a New Orleans musician, had COVID from coming back from a tour. So it felt a little bit too personal, a little bit too relevant to be working on this piece about the state of the performing arts in Louisiana with the pandemic, literally with a New Orleans musician who had the virus on the other side of the house and taking care of him during the process of writing this. So frankly, it felt a little disingenuous to be working on this piece and to not be candid about the fact that this was something that I didn't intend to go this way, and I didn't foresee the Delta variant affecting the state and affecting the performing arts scene as much as it did. I don't think any of us were able to foresee that. And of course, at that point, things really were different. And it was becoming evident that we were sort of at a turning point in that point in time when I wrote this story that came out at the end of August, beginning of September. We were really kind of, as I said, at a turning point. We were at a point where we weren't sure if live performance was going to be able to continue. We weren't sure if these big fall festivals that we love and we so much look forward to in New Orleans, we weren't sure if those were going to be able to happen or not. And everything at that point sort of was riding on how well we were able to respond to this new variant of the virus and how well we were able to do what we needed to do to keep each other safe and to be able to still meet and gather in public to witness these performers and to share these experiences that are so important for us as a society and for us as people.
And when you set up that piece, and in your job as a whole, you talk a lot to performers and to venue managers and so on. Mm-hmm. What was your sense then, and I guess other things that you've seen since, about, in addition to following city and state policy, what you've seen as far as the creative solutions that people have rolled out, things that we're doing now that we weren't doing prior to quarantines?
Absolutely, and that's the stuff that's really been exciting and inspirational to watch people pivot and figure out these creative solutions to keep things happening. Because I think that's something we realized during the height of the pandemic, is not having live performance is not an option in the state of Louisiana. It's just not. You can have virtual content all day, every day, but there's something we learned, it's just not the same. Yeah. As great as it can be, and as great as it is to see that so many places are keeping with that. Mm-hmm. In fact, the Louisiana Book Festival coming up, that's gonna be entirely virtual, and that's great because it is making it more accessible to people. Tipitina's has Tipitina's TV, and they still have continued doing some of those broadcasts, which is great. But as you know, I don't have to tell you, Andrew, it's just not the same as sitting in the audience, standing in the audience, and watching the performers and being with them there in person and sharing that kind of indescribable connection.
Yeah,
And that magic.
This is Tipitina's, y'all, which is an uptown music venue here, one of the big kind of standby must-do things. And, you know, if when the solution can be both, it's great for it to be both. You can, from a distance, before you take a trip here, you can observe a show at Tipitina's from far away and be like, oh, you know, what's the vibe? What kind of shoes should I wear while I'm there? Will I be sitting from this ticket that I bought, or will I be standing? You know, you get to put yourself in the mood, inform yourself, and then do it live. Like, the addition of those things, I think, is just such a positive.
Absolutely.
And one thing you wrote about in there, too, was outdoor venues, which is remarkably not really a thing in New Orleans prior to this last year and a half, but where we've seen several pop up. Do you have any favorites or any standouts that you tend to go to?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, we've seen so many just kind of like pop up through the course of the pandemic, and you're right, it is kind of surprising that those haven't been a thing prior to COVID. And I mean, yeah, the heat and the humidity will get you, but that being said, we've got lots of great fall weather coming up. I'm excited to have these outdoor spaces to enjoy live music in. One of them that's more recent is DBA's Palace Market on Frenchman Street. So you can actually see live music outdoors on Frenchman Street now, which is incredible. Besides just the usual bands and street performers that you get out there, you've got an actual outdoor venue, DBA's Palace Market. We've also got the Broadside that the folks at the Broad have put together. That is a beautiful space that I've caught some incredible acts at. A lot of fun to go see shows there. And it's been really cool to see a lot of these places popping up. You also have just straight up porches. Things like the Constantinople stage over Uptown, that is just a guy who has a nice porch on his house, and he hires bands to come and play on his porch. And his neighbors are really good sports, I guess, but you get folks bringing lawn chairs out, setting up on the curb, and watching some incredible acts. And I mean, Andrew, these aren't just like your usual, you know, like house show kind of bands. These are you know, members of the Revivalists, members of Naughty Professor. I mean, really big name musical acts and really talented musicians who have also been forced to scale down a little bit.
Yeah.
These are folks who normally wouldn't play to a house that was smaller than a couple of grand, but now, you know, given the current circumstances, they'll play for a few dozen people on a front porch, and everyone's having a great time with that. A little different than we're used to, but still a really cool thing to see. And the fact of the matter is that we're still able to keep it going.
Obviously, like, exhaustive knowledge here that you're carrying around on a day-to-day basis. So what kind of resources do you use to know about the things that are going on, and what kind of stuff do you recommend for someone who's like visiting town, doesn't already know their way around, and finds this kind of event-drivenness maybe like overwhelming to engage with?
Sure, because even as someone who curates an events calendar for a living, I have to admit, it's pretty overwhelming. There's a lot of stuff going on in New Orleans, certainly a lot of stuff going on in Louisiana as a whole. So this is the part where I've got to be a bit biased and say that as the person who does curate the events calendar for Country Roads, you know, I'm in contact with a lot of arts organizations in the city and in the state. I try to keep a pretty firm pulse on what's going on, and I am constantly writing up calendar events. I also send out an e-newsletter once a week that has events that I think are worth going to. And it's just me that's making this, you know, it's never any spam or anything, but I try to include things that I would want to go to and that I think are worth a drive. So it's stuff from all over the state, but I include live music, I include outdoor festivals, I include culinary events, I include plays. You know, all the things that really make Louisiana, we try to include. So as I said, got to be a little biased and throw the Country Roads calendar out there, but...
For sure, and to offer a less biased POV on that, it's not like, if you look at something like the Livewire music calendar that we often recommend, like, that is utterly comprehensive. It's every music act in town every day. But what Alex does is provides descriptive detail. It doesn't super help to know where an event is and when you don't know what's going on. And a lot of the calendars in town don't get into detail about what to expect. What kind of music is this? What kind of space is it? How long is it going to go on? Details like that. And Alex is great at providing that kind of stuff that'll actually tell you what you're in for.
Sure, too much detail if anything, but I was also going to give a shout out to the Livewire. Of course, that's an incredible resource as far as New Orleans live music goes. As far as New Orleans live music, I also got to give a shout out to Offbeat. They do a really great job with that really comprehensive music coverage. But what we do that's a little bit different at Country Roads is, as you said, we do provide a lot more detail, and we really try and curate that content. You know, when I send out these newsletters, as I said, I want it to be things that I would want to go to, that I think my friends would want to go to. So we do cultural coverage, which, as we were joking before this, is a pretty massive umbrella, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that qualify as culture. But what we try to cover, as I said, are things that we find interesting. That's the arts, that's entertainment, that's food, that's history, local history, if we find it interesting, and the environment and science sometimes as well. Not only do I get to cover, arts and entertainment, which means I get to talk to musicians and actors and chefs and wonderful, interesting people like that, but occasionally, in the case of our October issue that I just happen to have here, I also get to talk to people like alleged alien abductees. So it really is a great job. I absolutely love it. And this was a fun one, I have to say. My editorial team, they clearly trust me, which I really appreciate, because when I went into an editorial meeting and I pitched UFOs, and that was pretty much all I had for them to work with, they were really good sports about letting me do that. And what it resulted in is me getting a hold of one of the most credible alien abductees in modern history, a gentleman named Calvin Parker, who's originally from Laurel, Mississippi, but when he was living in Pascagoula in 1973, he and his friend Charles Hickson were fishing on the Pascagoula River, and they reported being abducted by aliens. And it's regarded as one of the most credible cases because not only was it two gentlemen who reported the abduction, but there are dozens of witnesses who have come forth since that account and reported seeing a UFO identical to the one they described or other things that corroborate their experience themselves. So it's not necessarily, the big French Quarter culture that you get in New Orleans. Sometimes it's a little bit more off the beaten path than that. But we try and cover what we think is interesting, and we try and change it up, clearly. So that's the October issue. September was our performing arts issue, where I got to tackle this really difficult but ultimately rewarding story about how COVID has impacted the performing arts scene.
It's fascinating stuff, y'all. I, as a resident, love reading this stuff, and I would totally take y'all's lead on things to go out and make videos about sometime. So look for Country Roads in the credits in the future. How can they find y'all?
And it's free.
Thank you, James. Appreciate that. The most important thing, actually, what we say is it's priceless. Not free, priceless. But no, that's a great question. Thank you, Andrew. You can find Country Roads at countryroadsmagazine.com. Like to keep it simple for you. And if you're interested in subscribing to our events e-newsletter that I send out every week, just scroll down on that homepage a little bit. You can't miss the subscription box for the e-newsletter, and you'll find all kinds of local cultural events, things like Dear Mr. Williams that Le Petit's putting on here, and lots of other really fun stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you, Andrew. Absolutely. It was a joy to be here talking with you.
Yeah, in our conversation, Alex and I brought up outdoor venues, including a place called the Broadside. And the Broadside is a great example of pandemic-era adaptation. It started off as the Broad Theater, a small, locally owned movie theater. And of course, movie theaters were one of the places hit the hardest by the pandemic. They ended up opening an outdoor space with the idea of being able to show films there. And it's also ended up being a real staple of live music on a scale that a lot of our indoor music venues don't end up offering. And it's easy to imagine that places like this are going to stick around and have a really valuable niche, even if at some point these restrictions are not a part of our lives anymore. So definitely, if you end up coming to town and looking for places to check out a show, the Broadside is going to be one of the places I'll highly recommend. Breweries have really stepped up to the plate as well. They're hosting some great outdoor stuff. And various restaurants that have added outdoor spaces for dining have also found that it's a great way to accommodate more live music. And if you do check out the Livewire music calendar that we've recommended, they give the helpful addition of noting which spaces are outdoors. So if that's a priority for you, you can find that information really easily with them. Another thing that we mentioned was these moments that help it feel like everything is moving in the right direction. And for me, one of those big moments was taking a walk through the French Quarter one day and hearing an unmistakable clarinet solo in the distance. I ran to the spot where it was being played, and sure enough, there was Doreen Ketchens and her band. And y'all, in the years that I've been showing people around in the Quarter, the best thing I could hope to have happen during a tour was to stumble on Doreen and her band and just kind of let them be the story for a few minutes. They are an institution of this neighborhood, and while street music is their signature, they are also part of the festival scene, the indoor music scene. They show up anywhere someone can convince them that it is worth their time. So I got to catch a quick little low-tech conversation with Ms. Doreen as she was wrapping up one of her work days, and we got a little bit of performance from her to share as well. So that's up next. Y'all, I am visiting Royal Street royalty, Doreen Ketchens, who is the front of Doreen's Jazz. Thank you so much for taking a second to do this, Ms. Doreen.
Thanks for including me.
Yeah. I know a lot of people are disappointed about Jazz Fest, but I think also a lot of people operate under the misconception that like who plays at a festival and who plays in the street is two different sets of people, and like y'all are the best proof. I know that is not how it works. So like, how long have you been playing the French Quarter, and how long have you been doing Jazz Fest?
So we've been playing the French Quarter for about 35 years, and we've been playing Jazz Fest for about 30 years. so
made their reputation out here really fast. Were y'all going to be at Jazz Fest this year?
Yes. Yeah. So as far as disappointed people, I'm one of them. Yes.
And like the latest in a long run of punches to roll with.
Yeah, I mean, now you could say, in hindsight, you could say, oh, you shouldn't have done that now. But hindsight is 2020. It was very unfair. At the moment, at the time, when they were canceling the thing, the numbers were just going the wrong way. So if people do what they're supposed to do, then everything will work. The virus will have no legs. But when you don't do what you're supposed to do, then you give it variance and stuff like that. And so what can you expect? We don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah, we were all hopeful for quite a while, and then we're seeing stuff happen.
That's right.
Well, so latest in a whole lot of punches to roll with. Like we said, what were y'all up to for like the first year of this? And you're back out here part time now.
Yeah, thank you.
But for a year, what did y'all do?
So we learned a lot of technology, and we actually got online and started doing some online stuff, which was good for the soul too. You know what I mean? So. We were still able to reach people and get, some of that instant gratification from the live, stuff. And that worked out really well. It's not the same playing in a room and talking to a screen as it is being out here, but it was great, a great substitute. At least we were able to do something. So.
Well, and just a few minutes ago, y'all, I got to video a Facebook Live for Miss Doreen out here, and so now you get both. Yes. Now, before your trip, you can check it out in advance, you can see what is going on in the quarter at that very moment, and then you can come out and visit in person. So
that's right, but only Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 11 to about 1 or 2. Because other than that, we won't be someone else to be on the corner.
Yeah, and where can people find you?
Royal Street at St. Peter. And if you forget that, in front of the Rouse's Market.
It's right behind Jackson Square, y'all. Super easy to get to.
That's right.
I think, too, when people hear y'all, there's such a kind of... So when people come to the quarter, obviously they want New Orleans. They want something they can't find anywhere else. But people kind of find themselves wanting something familiar. And I feel like y'all run a line down the middle of that repertoire really beautifully in terms of like, you do your jazz standards, you do jazzy variations on all kinds of things, but most people are going to hear a song they know, even if they're not jazz fans already.
Right.
How do you describe what y'all do? How do you like pick songs and adapt them?
I mean, we play what we want to play, and a lot of times what we want to play is stuff that people recognize and stuff like that. But we throw some some curveballs in, every so often, and a lot of times, they really enjoy that too. So, but yeah, I always said, I didn't want to play above my audience. I wanted to involve them and stuff like that. So that's what we do. So even if you're not hearing something that you think you want to hear, just ask us. If we know the song, we will play your request right away. If we don't know it, we'll just smile at you and play something else.
I've heard everything out of these folks, from What a Wonderful World to what I think must be one of your like secret favorite songs, the Flintstones theme song.
Flintstones, Spider-Man, you name it, man. Goodness gracious. Yeah.
A lot of the nostalgic TV that I grew up on, Doreen does banging versions of, along with some soul classics. I feel like is another real strength for y'all.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, so folks know how to find you. And guys, if what you want to be doing right now is either anticipating a trip and supporting someone in advance, if you're missing out on festivals and you're like, how can I still be involved? Or if when you get here, you want someone to already have a very good first impression of you, we're going to share Miss Doreen's tip information. And this is exactly how you'd tip if you came out here and watched the show live. So do consider throwing a tip in the virtual bucket. This is how these folks make their living, and we want to make sure they can keep doing it. I'm just so glad that y'all made it through all this time.
Man, me too. I'm glad you made it too, man. Familiar faces. I'll tell you, that first weekend we were out, I was just so emotional, and I was telling everybody, the people that were standing around, I said, even if nobody was listening, we were still able to play. It would just be the greatest blessing. I said, you guys being out here participating and enjoying, it's just gravy. Thanks for the gravy. So thanks in advance for the gravy, y'all.
So if people want to find you online before they make the trip, where should they go looking for you?
So our website is doreensjazz.org. It used to be .com, but that changed.
And y'all organized.
Yeah, and Doreen is DOREENSJAZZ.org.
We'll write that out for y'all.
Yeah. And, just Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, right here. Royal St. Peter, unless we're in Carnegie Hall or something like that.
She's not joking, y'all. I passed by one day when I was about to take a trip to Taiwan, and we just I threw out the name of the city I was going to, and she was like, yep, played these venues there, ate at these places. Incredible story behind Doreen's family and all the things that they've done. So y'all come and ask for some stories in person. Miss Doreen, thank you so much for making a second.
All right. Take care. All right, enjoy.
Y'all, if this video has been helpful to you at all, please drop any generosity in your heart towards Miss Doreen. We're going to have the means to do that down in the description below. And you can find the ways there to get in touch with them online, hear them do live performances no matter where you are. And also definitely check out the fine storytelling at Country Roads Magazine, as well as their event listings. All of those links are going to be down there too. And one last thought, y'all. This is October, and we are soon going to have Halloween coming on. And that is going to involve some events we haven't gotten to do for a long time. So pretty soon we're going to do a follow-up on things that are going on in New Orleans for Halloween, give y'all a close-up view of it. We'll drop that in the next few days. So keep an eye out. Thanks for watching, y'all, and see you soon.